to document the lives of people who endured slavery and just the Black experience. And she ran into Kazula Lewis, who was one of the youngest who was aboard the ship, and he lived the longest because he was one of the youngest. And when she interviewed him, she was the first to record videos of him, and maybe the only to record videos of him. But he is monumentalized in the community because he had that opportunity to share his story and to share what actually happened. And if y'all come to visit Mobile, which I hope that y'all do, there is this amazing museum called the Africatown Heritage House, and it outlines the story of the community, what they endured from when they were, like, before they experienced being captured and being slaves. It talks about their cultural traditions, their ethnic groups, and then it talks about them being aboard the ship and then what their lives look like after they landed in Mobile Bay and how they built Africatown and how the story has unfolded over time. And Barracoon is one of those books that we put on a pedestal because it's like the most humane, like you mentioned. Like, you really get to experience his life and his feelings because she didn't edit how he spoke. She wrote it in his dialect.
Yeah.
And it was a very powerful book, and I'm so grateful to Zora Neale Hurston for the work that she did.
And let's talk some more about it because Barracoon is written, she does her interviews in roughly, 1927 was when she traveled there. She finished most of the book in 1931. And then it sat, folks, because publishers would not publish it, partially because what Tiffany just talked about the fact that the book had dialect in it. And they thought it was, and a lot of people were yelling, "Oh, this is plagiarism. It doesn't really. This is fiction. It's not true." The South defenders were all doing that, trying to cast aspersions upon it. So it sat for decades, unpublished. People, had rumors of it. People would travel to Howard University to read the manuscript. But it just sat there until it sat there until 2018. 2018, folks, from 1931 to 2018. And it was amazing women like Deborah G. Plant, who decided, oh, no, this story has to get out. It has to be published. It was people like Alice Walker, who wrote the foreword, talk about foreword, to the book. And it was their determination to get this book out in the public that changed everything in this whole, this whole awareness of what had happened with the Clotilda. And it is just so important, folks, that you never, ever, ever forget your history, because the people who don't know their history are what? Bound to repeat it. So, so let's just talk about that. I mean, Zora Neale Hurston was an unusual Black woman in her own right. And she's a major author, right? I mean, she's one of those forgotten people. She was forgotten until Alice Walker resurrected her memory by, actually, tell people about Alice Walker, how she, resurrects Zora Neale Hurston's memory, because she had been lost to us also. Died in poverty, people. Deep poverty, just like Harriet Tubman. So many amazing Black women just ignored and die in poverty. But tell people, about Zora Neale Hurston.
Yeah, Tiffany, you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Barbara, you bring up a really critical point, and it's something that many people may not be aware of, but and it goes back really to Anna Julia Cooper as well.
Yes.
And that is the whole idea of gender politics of Black publishing. And so, some would say, well, the book sat unpublished for 8 decades because Zora and God didn't feel it was time, and Zora would probably, on some levels, agree with that. I mean, given what she was doing in that book and the hell that this country had gone through. But I think the thing that we've got to understand is that, and I'll start with Anna Julia Cooper as an example. People don't know about her as an author. But at 100 years old, she wrote a real brief letter to the African American newspaper, and it was this: "It is my wish that $279.65 contributed in honor of my 100th birthday be deposited at interest in Savings Department of National Savings and Trust Company to be used later in publication of my work on ethics of Negro problem and dialect." That was September 2nd, 1958. Okay. And she, I think it's called The Portable Anna Julia Cooper by Shirley Moody Turner. There are 32 letters, 33 exchanges between Du Bois and Anna Julia Cooper. And while Du Bois supported Cooper in general support, time after time, he resisted, neglected, and otherwise failed to assist her in the actual publication of her writing. So we know that Du Bois was still a force with the crisis and otherwise during Zora Neale Hurston's lifetime. So if one were to at least take up this woman and her work, Du Bois should have been the natural person to do that because of the leverage and juice that he had. But we must understand very clearly that is part of the conflict that Du Bois, along with people like Garvey, in terms of that patriarchal notion of what Black advancement meant in terms of male leadership, brought to, unfortunately, people like Anna Julia Cooper and Zora Neale in terms of getting their works published.
And I would and what Tiffany, Zora Neale Hurston, most of us know her for what? Their Eyes Are Watching God, and some of her amazing fiction that she wrote, and all the great books that people forgot that she started off, as a major, sociologist, was a major scholar, and that gets overlooked in the story of Zora Neale Hurston. I mean, she without Zora Neale Hurston, what would have been the power of the Harlem Renaissance, right? Without her contributions, Langston Hughes to Count Constable and all the others that she interacted with, and all of the incredible brilliance that she brought to that movement. There's just so much to be thought about. But what do you think when you think about Zora Neale Hurston?
Yeah, I was first introduced to Zora Neale Hurston in high school because Their Eyes Were Watching God was a novel that was assigned to it. And I thought that was beautiful and powerful to witness that book. But then when I discovered that she wrote Barracoon and wrote about my ancestors, and what Zora Neale Hurston stood for, like, really a woman who was beyond her time, like the first Black woman to be a filmmaker, and anthropologist, like so many things. And so I learned that when she was buried, her grave was unmarked for a period of time. And I think that was such an injustice how they did not honor Zora Neale Hurston while she was alive in order to honor her in her death. And I'm grateful that everybody is coming back to love Zora Neale Hurston over the last 10 or 20 years. But there's just so much more to discover about her and how she influenced and impacted America.
And Daryl, Their Eyes Were Watching God is a banned book.
That's exactly where I was getting ready to go, Barbara.
Go ahead.
I gotta ask you, Professor. I gotta ask you. Here we sit today, and we're watching Texas and Florida banning these books. Here we are talking about Zora Neale Hurston, talking about a lot of the history of the African that came to America that cannot be taught in the schools there. Is this not the prime example of lost culture, of lost connectivity, I believe is the word that you use, and understanding the experience of an entire race of people? Professor, help me out on this.
Absolutely, Daryl. I mean, I think for me, couple of decades ago, I really reflected back on how my history was taught to me. And for me, in terms of Black history, it was pretty much kind of Frederick Douglass. I knew about Harriet Tubman, some of the things she had done. You sprinkle in Rosa Parks and other people, but then the names you hear are Black men, MLK, Marcus Garvey. And I was like, wait a minute. I said, this can't be right. And so I just started doing the research, and that really was where it caught fire, because you realize when you do the actual research, the depth of what Black women have done in this country, the fact that in the late 19th century, they were the most progressive, radically thinking group in the country, period,
yes,
bar none, okay? Black men weren't even close. There were newspaper articles that would say, Black men, where are you? Okay, and they were talking about all the literary achievements that were coming from Black women. Okay, you look at our movement today. Where are the men? Okay, where are the men? It's Black women who are leading on every front. Voting rights. Okay, it's just it really is disturbing to me as a Black male to see the amount of patriarchy that is in play even right now. Within our communities. And I think we've got to get beyond it, to rise above it. There are men clearly who are committing and supporting the movement. The Reverend Al Sharpton has been very vocal on many, many issues in support of what's happening, what Black women are doing. But more have got to step up, and particularly those in academia who are doing the research. And as opposed to staying in their little concubines, get out. They need to get out into the street, to get out there and march, to get out there and get people to vote. Okay. And this is a message to everybody in the elite institutions, because they're getting the funding, they're sitting back on their tenure, and they're not doing the work to help and move and advance our people forward.
My. I just, want to, really, to focus on that, because there's a term, folks, you should know that you won't hear, terms like erasure, etc. You don't hear these terms in popular dialogue. But one term that you should also know that Ernie just was describing is called intersectional failure. And it's a failure within liberation movements to really embrace the role of women, and to instead to hide it, to deny it, to erase it, to downgrade it, to devalue it, to put it in the kitchen. All of those instead of up front in the ideological sphere. And that's why Anna Julia Cooper scared the hell out of people. Because she was such a powerful intellect, and she wasn't afraid of it. And I want to go back, for a moment, everyone, to the year 1895. I want you to mark it in your brain, mark it in your hearts. Think about it forever, because it is such a powerful date, year in African American history. It starts off with, in February of 1895, you have Frederick Douglass dies. After having been, this most important voice in African American history to that point, having been so influential. He dies right after coming from a women's suffragettes movement because he was fighting for the right to vote for women. And it